One of the most confusing concepts in JavaScript is actually called closures. The only reason they are confusing is because most people explain it in a very difficult way because they actually do not understand it themselves. But in this lesson, you're going to really understand closures in simple language and with simplicity because actually they're not that complicated. So let's take a look in the Mozilla documentation. I'm going to simply Google closures Mozilla and you're going to get this particular documentation. It's a very good read, so I highly recommend that you go and read it. So over here, the definition says a closure is the combination of a function and the lexical environment in which that function was declared. Now, this is pretty wordy, so I've actually created my definition for it myself, which is actually a little bit more simpler. So let's take a look over here. The definition says closure is a function that accesses value from its lexical environment. That's it. Okay? Not that complicated. So we're going to look at the second part later, but let's just focus on the first part. A closure is a function that accesses value from its lexical environment. So with that definition, let's go to our cheat sheet and let's look at what lexical environment was if you do not recall. So if you go on page number 3, I'm going to zoom in over here, and you see a lexical environment or lexical scope is the physical location or the physical scope where the variable or function is declared. That's the lexical environment, right? And you remember one other rule is that variables are picked up from the lexical environment. So basically, going back to our code, I've created a function, right? And let's say this function is receiving a parameter and it has an internal variable as well. So it takes param, whatever is passed to it, it takes the internal, it adds it together and returns whatever value it calculates. So over here, I have console.log fun. So I'm executing this function and passing the parameter 10 to it. So 10 goes over here. 10 plus internal, which is 2, is equal to 12, right? So I'm going to save this, refresh, and you see the value 12 is printed out. Now, let's say this is not a closure because the definition of a closure is that closure is a function that accesses, let me just fix the spelling, accesses value from its lexical environment. So this function is declared over here. So that's the location, physical location, and the lexical environment is the global scope. So this function is not accessing the value from its lexical environment, right? It's not accessing anything from the outside. So that's why this is not a closure. Now, to make it a closure, let me just create something outside. So I'm going to simply go const, I'm going to call a variable outer, and I'm going to make it equal to, let's say, 1, all right? So now this is a variable outside, and now I'm going to use this variable inside. So I'm going to simply come in and say over here plus outer, like such, all right? So now this function fun is accessing value as a parameter because it's passed. It has an internal variable, and also it's using a variable which is not in the scope over here. So it goes to the scope chain outside and finds it and then uses it inside. So now we have made a simplest example of a closure because it fits this definition. Any function that accesses value from its lexical environment is a closure. So I'm going to save this and go back to our cheat sheet over here, and you remember this is the scope chain. So if a variable is not found in a function, it goes outside to find it. If it doesn't find it, it keeps on going outside to its scope chain, its parents and its parents and its parents until it finds the variable that it's looking for. Like over here, the second function accesses value of A. It doesn't find it outside, inside, so it goes outside. It finds it over here, so it uses it. So this second function is actually a closure in this example, all right? So that's pretty much it for this video. This is the first part of it. So in the next video, I'm going to build on top of this concept and show you a little bit more advanced example, which is not that advanced. It's just one example one other feature on top of it. So talk to you in the next lesson.